Damn it! The billionaire cursed loudly. His voice echoed through the stormy winds and pouring rain of a turbulent day. He was on his way to sign a $1 billion deal when suddenly, boom! His car veered to the side of the road. One of the tires had blown out. With no cell phone signal, everything seemed hopeless. Out of nowhere, 3 black teenage boys appeared, laughing and chatting. "Need some help, sir?" one of them asked. After only 20 minutes, everything was taken care of. The damaged tire was replaced by 3 black boys. The billionaire took out some money from his wallet as a thank you, but the boys refused. Just a few days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of the boys' home, delivering some very special gifts. Let us reflect on this true story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more daily stories like this. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. The rain was relentless. Chris, a self-made white billionaire, was driving his luxury car carefully as the weather is not in his favor of haste. Rain was pounding on the roof of Chris's sleek black Mercedes like a drumbeat, each drop a reminder of his already crumbling schedule. The windshield wipers swished furiously, struggling to clear his view on the winding, desolate road. He glanced at the glowing digits on his dashboard. Only 45 minutes until his critical meeting in the city. This wasn't just any meeting, it was a $1 billion deal, the kind that could define his career even further. Chris had always prided himself on being in control. But today, control slipped from his grasp when the car jolted violently, accompanied by the unmistakable thud of a flat tire. Boom. Thump, 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 thump. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling the car over onto the narrow shoulder. He stepped out into the downpour, grimacing as the cold rain soaked through his tailored suit. The wind whipped around him, and the muddy roadside squelched under his leather shoes. Opening the trunk, he stared at the spare tire and toolkit, a sense of helplessness washing over him. Changing a tire wasn't exactly in his repertoire. He had people for that. He was standing on the outskirts of a small, deserted town, surrounded by vast expanses of sky and fields dotted with hills. He turned around, looking around, but there was no sign of people or houses. On this lonely stretch of road there was no one but him, the rain, and the ticking clock. As he debated calling for roadside assistance, Chris realized his phone had no signal. He cursed under his breath once again, damn it, looking around for any signs of help. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, with only him, his disappointment and his helplessness. If he failed to arrive on time for the important meeting, he would lose the opportunity to make a big deal, and it would also tarnish his image as a professional and punctual billionaire. Just as he was about to give up, faint laughter pierced through the rain. He squinted into the distance and saw 3 figures on bicycles pedaling toward him. They were black boys, no older than 15, their laughter cutting through the dreary storm. They wore mismatched raincoats, each splattered with mud from the puddles they had biked through. The trio slowed down as they approached the car with flat tire. The tallest, a boy with curly hair and a worn-out blue raincoat, called out, "Hey, mister, need some help?" Chris straightened up, blinking in disbelief. He glanced at their bicycles, then at their youthful faces, his instinct to politely decline wrestling with the reality of his situation. Yeah, I got a flat tire," he finally admitted, gesturing toward the shredded rubber. "But I'm not sure if we can help." The boy in the blue raincoat, Ethan, interrupted with a confident grin. His 2 friends, Tony and Peter, nodded eagerly. "We've done this loads of times. Well, mostly on bikes, but it's the same idea." Chris hesitated, watching as Ethan handed his bike to Tony and knelt down to inspect the tire. "You've got a spare, right?" Ethan asked, peering up at him through rain-spattered glasses. "In the trunk," Chris said, stepping aside. The boys moved with a natural rhythm, each taking on a role as if rehearsed. Tony fetched the jack and wrench from the trunk, while Peter positioned himself to steady the car. Ethan, the leader, began loosening the lug nuts with steady hands. "You don't mind getting wet?" Chris asked, his voice tinged with skepticism and curiosity. "It's just rain," Peter said with a shrug. "We're already soaked anyway." As they worked, Chris found himself marveling at their efficiency. Despite their soaked clothes and the pouring rain, the boys chatted and laughed as if this were an adventure rather than a chore. Their teamwork was seamless. Tony passed tools, Peter steadied the car, and Ethan replaced the flat tire with a new one in record time. "Done," Ethan announced, wiping his muddy hands on his raincoat with a satisfied grin. Chris looked at the car, then at the boys, incredulous. "You really pulled it off," he said, his tone a mix of disbelief and gratitude. He reached into his wallet, pulling out a wad of crisp bills. "Here, take this. You've earned it." But Ethan waved him off. "No need, mister. We were just passing by and thought we'd help." Tony and Peter nodded in agreement. "Besides, you need to get to where you're going," Tony added. Chris stared at them, baffled. He wasn't used to kindness without strings attached, without ulterior motives. "Are you sure?" "It's the least I can do," he insisted. Ethan smiled, shaking his head. "We're sure. Just drive safe, okay?" And with that, the boys hopped back on their bikes, pedaling away into the rain, their laughter echoing in the distance. Chris stood there for a moment, watching them disappear. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't quite name, something that went beyond gratitude. As he climbed back into his car, he glanced at the now functioning dashboard clock. There was still time to make it to his meeting, but as he drove off, it wasn't the meeting that occupied his thoughts. It was the three boys, their genuine kindness, and the unexpected impact they had left on him. Chris drove through the storm with renewed urgency, his hands gripping the steering wheel as the repaired car sliced through the rain-soaked road. The meeting loomed large in his mind, but his thoughts kept wandering back to the boys. Their muddy raincoats, easy laughter, and unflinching teamwork had left an impression that lingered far longer than he expected. He arrived at the towering glass skyscraper just as the rain began to ease. The valet hurried over with an umbrella, and Chris stepped out, adjusting his now damp suit. The attendant gave him a curious glance, noting the muddy smudges on his cuffs, but Chris brushed it off with a curt nod. Inside, the conference room buzzed with activity. His team was already there, shuffling papers and whispering among themselves. The clients, a group of investors, sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, their expressions unreadable. Chris took his seat at the head of the table, forcing his focus onto the task at hand. This deal, a merger worth billions, was months in the making. He leaned forward, his usual commanding presence returning as he began presenting his vision, navigating the complex financials and answering questions with his trademark precision. But somewhere in the back of his mind, the scene from earlier replayed, the boys huddled under the rain, their hands working quickly, their laughter rising above the storm. They hadn't asked for anything, hadn't expected anything. They simply helped. As the meeting stretched on, Chris found himself distracted. His voice faltered once, then twice, earning surprised glances from his team. He was known for his sharpness, his ability to command a room. But today, the usual drive that propelled him seemed muted, replaced by something more introspective. When the meeting finally concluded, Chris managed to seal the deal, though it felt less satisfying than he anticipated. As the clients filed out, shaking his hand and congratulating him, Chris nodded absently, already lost in thought. Back in his office, he loosened his tie and sank into his leather chair, staring out at the city skyline. Rain streaked the glass, the storm still lingering over the metropolis. On any other day, he'd be celebrating, feeling the rush of accomplishment that came with closing such a monumental deal. But today, his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the moment he reached for his wallet, expecting the boys to accept his offer. Their refusal had caught him off guard, leaving him unsteady. In his world, everything had a price. Generosity was often calculated, a tool for networking or building influence. But those boys had helped him with no expectation of repayment. It was a concept so simple, yet so foreign. Chris leaned back, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. He remembered Ethan's confident grin, Tony's steady hands, Peter's casual shrug. They had shown a kind of selflessness he hadn't encountered in years, and it left him questioning something he couldn't quite define. For the rest of the evening, Chris couldn't shake the feeling that he owed them more than a thank you or a wad of cash. The storm outside began to clear, the city lights shimmering against the wet streets below. As he watched the rain fade into the distance, Chris made a decision. He would go back to that small town, not out of obligation, but because he needed to do something more, something meaningful. He didn't know what form it would take or how the boys would react. But for the first time in years, Chris felt a spark of genuine purpose, something that went beyond boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. And he knew that this, more than anything else he'd achieved, was worth pursuing. The next morning, Chris woke earlier than usual, his resolve firm. The sun was peeking through the clouds, the remnants of the storm reduced to puddles along the city streets. He dressed in casual clothes, a navy sweater and dark jeans, a departure from his usual suit and tie. Today wasn't about business, it was personal. As he drove toward the small town, the highway opened up to rolling fields and quiet houses. The memory of the boys and their selfless act grew stronger with each mile. Chris knew he couldn't repay their kindness with a simple gesture. It had to be something meaningful, something that would show his gratitude while honoring their humble nature. He arrived at the stretch of road where the flat tire had stopped him. The air was crisp, the aftermath of the storm leaving the earth fresh and fragrant. He slowed his car as he approached the small town, scanning for signs of the boys. It wasn't long before he spotted them. Ethan, Tony, and Peter were gathered outside a modest diner, their bikes propped against the wall. They were laughing, the kind of carefree laughter that comes with youth and friendship. Chris smiled, parking his car across the street and stepping out. As he crossed the road, Ethan noticed him first. "Hey, it's the guy from yesterday," he called out, nudging his friends. The other two turned, their faces lighting up in recognition. "Hey, mister," Tony greeted, his tone casual but friendly. "Car holding up okay?" Chris chuckled, nodding. "Thanks to you three it is." He paused, glancing at the bikes leaning against the wall. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" The boys exchanged glances, then shrugged in unison. "Sure," Peter said, gesturing to the bench outside the diner. Chris sat down, feeling out of place yet oddly at ease. "I wanted to thank you properly for yesterday. You didn't have to help, but you did, and it made a bigger impact than you know." Ethan grinned. "It was no big deal. You looked like you needed a hand." Tony chimed in. "Yeah, and besides, we were already soaked. Figured we might as well do something useful." Chris laughed, shaking his head. "You three have more generosity than most people I've met in my entire life." Peter leaned back, arms crossed. "It's just what you do, right? Help someone out when they need it." Chris studied them for a moment, their sincerity catching him off guard once again. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small notebook he'd brought to jot down ideas on the way. "I know you didn't do it expecting anything in return," he began, "but I want to do something for you, for all of you." The boys looked at each other, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. "Like what?" Ethan asked, his tone measured. "Well," Chris said, leaning forward, "how about I fix up your bikes? Or get you something you've been wanting for a while, something practical. Think of it as my way of showing my appreciation." Tony frowned, shaking his head. "You don't have to do that, mister, we're good." Peter added, "Yeah, we weren't looking for a reward." Chris raised a hand, smiling. "I know, but this isn't about rewards. It's about paying forward the kindness you showed me. Let me do something for you." Ethan hesitated, glancing at his friends. "Well, there is something." Tony and Peter shot him curious looks, and Ethan continued, "There's this community center we hang out at sometimes. It's kind of falling apart, leaks in the roof, old equipment. They've been trying to raise money to fix it up, but it's slow going." Chris leaned back, considering this. "A community center? Huh. That sounds like something worth helping with." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, it's where a lot of kids go after school. It's important to the town." Tony added, "If you really want to do something, maybe you could help them out instead of us." Chris smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. These boys weren't just kind, they were thoughtful, looking out for their community even when offered something for themselves. "All right," he said, standing up. "You've got a deal. I'll see what I can do about that community center." The boys grinned, their excitement tempered by humility. "Thanks, Mr. Ethan said, extending a hand. Chris shook it firmly, looking at the trio with newfound respect. "No," Chris replied, his voice steady. "Thank you. You reminded me that the world could use more people like you." As he walked back to his car, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Helping the boys was just the beginning. This small town had something special, and Chris was determined to be a part of preserving it. As he drove away, the image of their smiling faces stayed with him, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples far beyond their origins. The next week, Chris returned to the small town, this time armed with a plan. He had made a few calls, pulling strings that only someone with his resources could. But this wasn't about flexing his wealth, it was about using it for something that truly mattered. He parked his car near the diner where he'd first reconnected with the boys and stepped out, scanning the street. It was quieter today, the lazy hum of a small town settling into its midweek rhythm. Ethan, Tony, and Peter weren't at the diner this time, but Chris wasn't worried. He knew where to find them. After chatting with a few locals, he made his way to the community center they had mentioned. The building was modest, its once bright paint faded by years of wear and tear. The roof had visible patches, and the playground behind it looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. Yet, there was a charm to it, a sense of purpose that shone through the imperfections. Inside, Chris found the boys sitting at a table covered in papers and markers. They were working on a banner that read, "Community Center Fundraiser, Every Little Bit Helps." When they saw him, their faces lit up with surprise. "Hey, Mr. Chris," Ethan greeted, setting down a paintbrush. "What are you doing here?" Chris smiled, stepping closer. "I told you I wanted to help, didn't I? Thought I'd come see what you're working on." Tony gestured to the banner. "We're trying to raise money for the center. Got a bake sale and a car wash planned for the weekend." Peter chimed in. "It's slow going, but every bit counts." Chris nodded, impressed by their initiative. "You three are something else, you know that. But I think we can speed things up a little." The boys exchanged curious glances. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked cautiously. Chris knelt to their level, his tone serious but kind. "I made a few calls. Some friends of mine in construction, equipment suppliers, even a few local business owners. They're all on board to help fix this place up." The boys stared at him, their eyes wide with disbelief. "You're serious?" Tony asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chris nodded. "Completely. This center is important to your community, and you three reminded me that helping others can mean more than anything money can buy. The repairs start next week." Ethan looked at Tony and Peter, his face breaking into a grin. "Did you hear that? He's going to fix the center." Peter jumped up, his excitement contagious. "This is amazing. The kids are going to love it." Tony, always the practical one, frowned slightly. "But how much is all this going to cost you, Mr. Chris? You don't have to spend so much just for us." Chris laughed, standing up. "Tony, this isn't just for you. It's for everyone who uses this place, now and in the future. And trust me, it's worth every penny." The boys were buzzing with excitement, but Chris wasn't finished. He turned to the door as a woman entered, her arms full of papers and a tired smile on her face. She paused when she saw him. "Hi," she said, her tone polite but wary. "I'm Karen, the director of the center. Can I help you?" Chris extended a hand. "I think I'm here to help you, Karen. The boys told me about the work you're doing here. I'd like to pitch in." Karen's eyes widened. "Pitch in? How?" Chris gestured to the building. "I'm organizing a full renovation. New roof, updated playground, proper equipment for the kids. Whatever you need to make this place what it should be." Karen blinked, her hand covering her mouth. I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," Chris replied with a warm smile, "and let me know how I can make your job easier." Karen looked at the boys, then back at Chris, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes. Absolutely yes. Thank you." Over the next few hours, Chris worked with Karen and the boys to create a detailed plan. The renovations would begin immediately, starting with the roof and structural repairs. Chris made notes as Karen spoke passionately about the programs they wanted to offer but couldn't due to the building's condition. The boys chimed in with ideas for the playground and activity areas, their energy infectious. When Chris finally left that evening, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the small town. He looked back at the community center, imagining what it would look like in a few months, a place that wasn't just functional but thriving, filled with laughter and possibility. Driving away, Chris felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a project. It was a chance to leave a lasting impact, to honor the selflessness of three boys who had reminded him of the importance of connection and kindness. He smiled, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. For the first time in years, Chris felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The renovations began swiftly, with teams of workers arriving at the community center the following week. Chris ensured that everything was planned to the last detail. The old, leaky roof was replaced first, followed by repairs to the walls, plumbing and electrical systems. It wasn't just a restoration, it was a complete transformation. Ethan, Tony, and Peter were there every day after school, watching in awe as the center changed before their eyes. They helped wherever they could, carrying tools, clearing debris, and even painting walls. The construction workers quickly grew fond of the boys, often joking with them and letting them take on small tasks under supervision. Chris made frequent visits, overseeing the progress and chatting with the workers. But his favorite moments were the breaks, sitting outside with the boys and Karen, discussing plans for the future of the center. Each day, Chris felt a deeper connection to the community and the project. One bright Saturday morning, as the workers were finishing the final touches on the new playground, a crowd began to gather. Families from the town had heard about the renovations, and the excitement was palpable. The playground was a centerpiece, a vibrant area with colorful swings, a slide, and a jungle gym. It stood as a symbol of what was possible when people came together. Chris stood with Karen, watching as the last pieces of the playground equipment were bolted into place. Karen turned to him, her expression a mix of gratitude and amazement. "I don't think we'll ever be able to thank you enough," she said, her voice soft. Chris smiled, shaking his head. "Karen, this isn't about thanks. This place is going to mean so much to so many people. That's all I need." She nodded, but her eyes glistened. "You've done more than just fix a building, Chris. You've given this town hope." Before Chris could respond, Ethan, Tony, and Peter came running over, their faces alight with excitement. "It's done. The playground's done," Ethan exclaimed, pointing toward the workers who were stepping away from the newly installed equipment. Chris looked at the boys, their energy contagious. "You three should have the honor of testing it out first," he said, motioning toward the playground. Without hesitation, the boys sprinted toward the swings, laughing as they climbed aboard. Their carefree joy was infectious, drawing cheers from the gathered crowd. Parents watched with smiles, and children began lining up to join in. As the day turned into evening, Chris stood on the steps of the community center, gazing out at the bustling crowd. People mingled, children played, and laughter echoed through the air. Karen joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "You've changed this place, Chris," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "But I think you've also changed yourself." He chuckled, taking a sip of the coffee. "You're not wrong," he admitted. "Those boys, they reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Kindness doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it's as simple as stopping to help someone in need." Karen smiled. "And sometimes it grows into something much bigger." Later that evening, as the event wound down and families began to head home, Ethan, Tony, and Peter found Chris near his car. They stood quietly for a moment before Ethan stepped forward. "Mr. Chris, we just wanted to say thanks. Not just for the center, but for everything," Ethan said, his voice earnest. Chris knelt to their level, looking each of them in the eye. "No, thank you. If it weren't for you three, I wouldn't have remembered what really matters." Tony shifted, his hands in his pockets. "You know, we just thought we were helping with a flat tire." Chris laughed, reaching out to tousle Tony's hair. "You did more than that, Tony. You helped me fix something I didn't even realize was broken." Peter grinned, his eyes twinkling. "Well, if you ever need help again, you know where to find us." Chris stood, smiling warmly at the boys. "I think I'll take you up on that one day." The boys waved as they walked back toward their families, leaving Chris standing by his car. He watched them go, a profound sense of fulfillment settling over him. As Chris drove away that night, he didn't feel the emptiness that had once been his constant companion. Instead, he felt whole. The community center wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of what could happen when people came together, when they chose kindness over indifference. Join the movement for justice. Subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and make these stories a part of your daily life. Together we can create real change.